My father left me one thing when he died. One, not a savings account, not a house, not a truck, one watch. And the woman who was supposed to protect what was his spent 3 minutes deciding it was hers to give away. My name is James White. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed electrician working out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And until 11 months ago, I believed naively I now understand that certain things in this world were untouchable, sacred, that some people, no matter how wrong they could be about everything else, would not cross the line you drew in the dirt over your dead father's grave. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My father, Robert White, died on March 14, 2021. He was 61 years old. He worked 27 years as a general contractor in the Charlotte metro area, mostly residential remodels, kitchen and bathroom work, additions on older homes in neighborhoods like Noda and Plaza Midwood. He wasn't a wealthy man. He was a working man who did things right, charged what was fair, and paid his crew before he paid himself. When he died, cardiac event, no warning, found at his workbench in the shop attached to his house in the Steel Creek area of southwest Charlotte. He left behind a business with modest receivables, a truck that was paid off, a small house with a modest mortgage, and a Rolex Datejust 41 in stainless steel with a silver dial that he had bought himself in 1998 after finishing the largest kitchen renovation contract of his early career. He wore that watch every day for 23 years. The case back was engraved to James. Earn yours. Love, Dad. He had it engraved in 29 on my 22nd birthday, the year I got my apprentice electrician's license. He didn't give it to me then. He told me he was holding it until I proved I could take care of something that mattered. I spent the next 12 years watching it on his wrist, earning what I thought was going to be my inheritance of it. When he died, I was 31. The watch came to me in a small velvet pouch tucked inside a sealed envelope that his attorney handed me at the reading of the will on March 22, 2021. The envelope also contained a handwritten note. 3 sentences in my father's all-caps block print. James, you earned it. Don't let anyone make you feel small. The watch knows the hours you put in. I wore it on my right wrist. I'm left-handed, for exactly 4 days. Then I put it in the fire safe I kept bolted to the floor of my bedroom closet because I worked with my hands, and the thought of scratching the bezel on a conduit run made me genuinely anxious. That safe had a 6-digit combination that I had memorized and written nowhere. For 3 years it stayed there. Or so I believed. Let me tell you about the people who changed that. My mother, Carol White, now Carol Pute, since she remarried in 2019, is 58 years old. She and my father divorced when I was 14. She moved to the Valentine area of South Charlotte in 2018 when she married her second husband, a commercial insurance broker named Dennis Pute, 61. Dennis is the kind of man who calls himself a self-made success story, while conveniently not mentioning that his first business was funded by his father-in-law's retirement account. He has strong opinions about things he doesn't understand, and the volume to deliver them without invitation. Dennis has a son from his first marriage. His name is Kyle Pute. He's 27 years old, 7 years younger than me. And as of March 2024, Kyle Pute had never held a job for longer than 14 months, had started and abandoned 4 business ventures in 3 years, and owed money to at least 6 people that I knew of personally. The ventures were a food truck that never got a permit, a mobile detailing service that lasted 1 summer, a cryptocurrency consulting channel on YouTube with 41 subscribers, and the most recent, a residential property management software startup that Kyle called Pute Prop and described as Airbnb meets QuickBooks for the everyday landlord. That last one is relevant. Hold on to it. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that Kyle Pute was the single most enthusiastically unsuccessful person I had ever encountered. He had the confidence of someone who had succeeded at everything, and the track record of someone who had succeeded at nothing. And the gap between those 2 things was filled entirely by other people's money and tolerance. My mother had historically provided both. In April 2024, 3 years and 1 month after my father's funeral, I got a call on a Thursday afternoon while I was finishing a panel upgrade in a house on Archdale Drive in South Charlotte. The number was local, but not in my contacts. I almost sent it to voicemail. I didn't. Is this James White? The voice was male, older, steady, the voice of a man who had seen enough not to be rattled by things. Who's asking? My name is Ray Kowalski. I run Kowalski Gold and Pawn on South Boulevard. I've got a watch here I think you should know about. My hand tightened on the phone. What kind of watch? Rolex, date just 41. Stainless silver dial. Engraved case back says to James, "Earn yours. Love, Dad." I sat down on the concrete floor of that mechanical room. I didn't plan to. My legs just stopped working. Who brought it in? Ray paused. The way people pause when they're deciding how much to say. Young man, mid-20s, said it was a family piece he was liquidating to fund a business. Said it was his to sell. Kyle, Mr. White? Ray continued. I've been in this business 31 years. I know what a watch looks like when it belongs to the person selling it. This one didn't. I didn't buy it, but I got his information. Name, ID, the whole intake form. I kept it because my gut said I'd need it. I was already standing up looking around for my keys. Don't sell it to anyone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I found out later how he got to me. The engraving gave him the first name, James. The watch was a Rolex, date just worth real money. And Ray Kowalski was not the kind of man who let something like that pass without doing his homework first. He looked up licensed electricians named James White in Charlotte. The Mecklenburg County Contractor License Database is public record, searchable by trade and name, and worked through the list until someone answered. I was the third call. He told me that himself when I asked him directly, standing at his counter later that afternoon. 3 calls to find the right James White. Most people in his position would have shrugged and moved on, filed a report, forgotten about it. Ray Kowalski called 3 times. That tells you everything about the kind of man he is. Kowalski Golden Pawn sat in a brick strip on South Boulevard in the South End neighborhood of Charlotte between a transmission shop and a Vietnamese restaurant that always smelled better than anything had a right to. The sign in the window was hand-painted. The bars on the glass were old but solid. Ray Kowalski was behind the counter when I walked in. 70-something, compact with the kind of deliberate stillness that comes from decades of watching people walk through that door with stories attached to everything they carried. He looked at me when I came in and nodded once, like he'd been expecting exactly this. James White. Yeah. He reached under the counter without another word and placed a velvet tray on the glass. There it was. The Rolex, date just 41. Stainless case, silver dial, the oyster bracelet my father had kept polished with a chamois cloth every Sunday evening. There was a hairline scratch on the case at 4:0 that I recognized. My father had caught it on the edge of a tile saw in 2018 and spent 20 minutes annoyed at himself about it. I turned it over to James. Earn yours. Love, Dad. My jaw was working, but nothing was coming out. Re-waited. He was good at waiting. You said he tried to sell it. I finally managed. Tried. I told him I needed to verify the provenance before I could make an offer. Standard practice on any piece worth more than 1,000. Rolex, date just 41 in this condition runs between 6 and 9, 0 retail depending on papers and box. He didn't have papers. Didn't have a box. Couldn't tell me the reference number. Couldn't describe the movement. Ray set both hands flat on the counter. He got nervous when I started asking questions. Said he'd come back. Left without the watch. He left it here. He'd put it on the intake tray when he came in. Left it when he walked out. Technically abandoned property at that point. Ray allowed himself a very small controlled smile. I have 31 years of intake logs. That watch has never been in my shop before today. Which told me what I needed to know about who it actually belonged to. How did you find me? Engraving to James called 3 electricians named James White and Charlotte before I got you. He shrugged. I'm thorough. I picked up the watch. The weight of it was exactly as I remembered. 130 g with the bracelet, substantial and specific in the palm. I turned it face up and looked at the dial. Mr. Kowalski. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I need that intake form. The one with his name and ID. Reopened a folder that was already sitting next to the register. He slid it across the glass without a word. Kyle Pute, North Carolina driver's license. Current address in Valentine. The same house as my mother and Dennis. He had walked into a pawn shop with my dead father's watch and tried to sell it in my name. Engraved with my name from a safe in a house he had no access to except he had had access somehow. I looked up at Ray. Did he say anything else about where he got it? Ray was quiet for a moment. He mentioned his family was liquidating some assets to invest in a business opportunity. Used the word family twice. A beat like he expected that to make it acceptable. His family. I thought about the fire safe, the 6-digit combination. The only people who had ever been in my apartment were me and 3 months ago, in January 2024, my mother, who had come to help me deal with a broken water heater. She'd been in my bedroom while I was in the utility closet. She'd asked where I kept important documents once a couple of years back, in the way people ask questions that they remember long after you've forgotten the conversation. I thought about my mother's handwriting in a notebook in her kitchen. The one she used for phone numbers and combinations and appointment times because she didn't trust her phone. I thought about a lot of things standing there in that shop on South Boulevard with my dead father's watch in my hand. Then Ree said, "There's one more thing." He reached across the counter and took the watch back from me gently. "The way you handle something that matters." He turned it to the 6:0 position on the bracelet, the underside of the clasp, and pressed his thumbnail into a seam I had never noticed. A section of the clasp housing shifted barely a millimeter, but it moved. "Rolex date just from the late 1990s, Ray said, his voice taking on the patient tone of someone explaining something they genuinely love. Some collectors modified the clasp housing to include a micro compartment, not factory, done by independent watchmakers, usually in Switzerland or Germany. Space is barely 4 mm by 8. The latch is designed to be invisible, unless you know what you're looking for." He held the watch toward the light. Inside the open clasp, a space I could not have found in 1,000 years of handling that watch on my own, was a tightly folded square of paper. Yellowed at the edges, small enough to have sat there untouched for years. Ray set the watch on the velvet tray. He placed a pair of jeweler's tweezers next to it. "I'll leave that to you." He walked to the far end of the counter to give me space. My hands were not entirely steady as I lifted the paper free and unfolded it. My father's handwriting. All caps, block print, tight and deliberate. The letters slightly larger than usual because he had been writing very small on a very small piece of paper. James Safe Deposit Box. BB&T Branch, Park Road Shopping Center, Charlotte, Box 214. Key is in my socket set, taped under the 916 deep. You'll know what to do. I read it twice. Then I stood at that counter for a full minute and did not move. My father had hidden a note inside his watch. A note addressed to me, a note he had placed there himself at some point in the 23 years he had worn it and said nothing about. You'll know what to do. He had written that with the certainty of a man who believed it absolutely. I folded the paper, placed it in my shirt pocket, and looked up at Ray Kowalski, who was pretending to organize a display case and doing a poor job of it. "Ree," he turned. "Thank you for not selling it, for calling me for all of it." He waved a hand that said, "Don't make it a big deal in the way that people do when something actually is. Your old man put that note in there for a reason. Go find out what it was." I put the watch on my wrist, walked out into the April afternoon on South Boulevard, got in my truck, and sat there for 30 seconds, letting the reality of what had just happened settle over me. Then I drove straight to Park Road Shopping Center. The BB&T branch in the Park Road Shopping Center had been rebranded to Truist after the 2019 merger between BB&T and Sunrust. That's just what happens to banks over time. They change names and keep the furniture, but the location was the same, the safe deposit vault was the same, and the boxes were the same. I want to be precise about the timeline here because it matters. My father opened that safe deposit box at the original BB&T branch on Park Road during his working years. The branch records, which I would later obtain copies of, showed the box was opened in his name in 23 when I was 16 years old. He had been paying the annual fee, $45 a year at the time, later $55 continuously, for 18 years. When BB&T merged into Truist in 2019, the safe deposit accounts transferred without interruption. He had been paying the fee through the estate account automatically until March 2024, 1 month before this story reaches the pawn shop, meaning that box had been quietly maintained, fee paid, sitting in a vault in a strip mall on Park Road in South Charlotte for 21 years, and nobody, not his attorney, not his accountant, not me, had known to look. He had been a careful man, my father. I understood that better standing in the Truist lobby that April afternoon than I ever had at his funeral. The branch manager was a woman named Patricia Odom, early 50s, efficient, the kind of professional who processes unusual situations without visibly needing to recalibrate. I presented my father's death certificate, the letter's testament from his estate, my own ID, and the key from the socket set, which I had stopped at his old shop to retrieve. The 9/116 deep socket, still carrying a strip of yellowed masking tape on the underside with the key taped to it in a small paper envelope. Patricia examined everything, confirmed the estate documents were in order, and walked me to the vault. Box 214 was in the middle row, standard size, about 5 and x10 and x2 feet deep. Patricia inserted the branch's master key alongside mine, turned both, and stepped back. I pulled the box, carried it to the private viewing room, set it on the table, opened it. Inside, a sealed manila envelope with my name on it in my father's handwriting. Below the envelope, a smaller zipper pouch in black nylon. And below that, a worn leather ledger, the kind with a sewn binding and pre-printed columnar pages, the kind contractors used for job tracking before everything went digital. I opened the envelope first. 3 pages, handwritten, dated November 12th, 2019, 2 years before my father's death. James, if you're reading this, then either I decided to tell you about it in person and forgot, which is possible I'm getting old, or I didn't get the chance. I'm going to assume I didn't get the chance because that's the kind of thing I'd want covered. The ledger is a record of every unpaid invoice from 2014 to 2019. 14 jobs where the client took the work and didn't pay in full. Total outstanding $61,400. I stopped chasing most of them because I didn't have the energy. But the debt is real and documented. Names, addresses, dates, amounts, signed contracts, copies, everything an attorney would need. The envelope has 2 things. A savings bond series I bought between 1998 and 27. 15 bonds. Various denominations. Current redemption value as of the date I'm writing this is approximately $44.0. The bonds are in your name. I had them issued that way when I bought them, which means they're yours regardless of what the will says or who contests it. Take them to any Federal Reserve Bank or Treasury Direct and redeem them directly. The second thing is a letter to whoever needs to read it. You'll know when that is. I built what I could with the time I had. I'm proud of you. Stop letting people talk you out of that. Dad, I sat in that room for a long time. The bonds were there. 15 United States savings bonds issued between 1998 and 27, all in the name of James Robert White. Series E bonds, which earn interest, for 30 years from the issue date. The ones issued in 1998 had been earning interest for 26 years by April 2024. I would later confirm with a Treasury Direct calculator that the current redemption value of all 15 bonds was $51,200, not $44.0. Interest had kept working. The ledger was exactly as described. 14 jobs documented in my father's precise block print. Client names, addresses, scope of work, contract amounts, amounts paid, amounts outstanding. Copies of signed contracts paper clipped to each entry. Some of them 20 pages of detailed specifications. 14 clients who had taken his labor and not finished paying for it. The total outstanding balance in the ledger, $61,400. I sat in that room with those three items in front of me and thought about my father at his workbench in the Steel Creek shop, 61 years old, writing those 3 pages and sealing them in an envelope and putting them in a box that nobody would find unless they found the note in the watch. He had built a contingency, a backup plan, for his son, assembled quietly over 20 years, hidden in the most careful way he could manage, secured against the possibility that the world might not treat me the way it should. And then he had died and left me the watch and trusted me to find the rest. I didn't know it yet, but I was also about to find out how the watch had left my safe in the first place. And that conversation was going to be worse than I expected. I put the bonds in my jacket's inside pocket. I took the ledger. I took the letter. I locked the box, returned it to Patricia, and thanked her. Then I drove to my mother's house in Valentine. The Pewd house was a 4-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac in the Valentine neighborhood of South Charlotte, a neighborhood of newer construction, big garages, and the specific kind of quiet that comes from proximity to money rather than from actual peace. I pulled into the driveway at 4:40 p.m. on a Thursday in April 2024 and sat in the truck for exactly 90 seconds. I needed to be calm, not cold. Calm, there is a difference. Cold is about distance. Calm is about knowing exactly what you're doing and why. My mother answered the door. Carol Pewd, 58, in yoga clothes, holding a glass of iced tea with the expression of a woman who had been expecting this visit in the abstract and was still not prepared for the concrete version of it. James, the word came out in the careful register people use when they know a storm is coming and are hoping the forecast was wrong. Come in. Dennis was in the kitchen. He stood when I walked in. I'll give him that much. He stood up, but his face had already done the calculation and arrived at the wrong answer. He thought this was a conversation he could navigate. Kyle was not there. I had expected that. I set the watch on the kitchen counter. Not hard, not dramatic. Just placed it there face up so the dial caught the light. My mother's eyes went straight to it. Where did you get that? Dennis started. Ray Kowalski at Kowalski Gold and Pawn on South Boulevard called me this afternoon. Kyle brought my father's Rolex in to sell it. Ray didn't buy it because Kyle couldn't answer basic questions about provenance. Kyle left it behind and Ray called me. Silence. That watch was in a fire safe in my apartment. I continued. 6-digit combination. Kyle doesn't know my combination. Kyle has never been in my apartment. I looked at my mother. You were there in January. You asked me once where I kept important documents. Carol set down her iced tea. Her face had gone the color of someone who has been hoping a small thing would stay small and has just watched it become something else. James. Mom. Not angry, just clear. How did Kyle get the combination to my safe? The kitchen was very quiet. Dennis crossed his arms. You don't know it was from us. Kyle Pewd walked into a pawn shop with a watch engraved with my name and tried to sell it as a family piece he was liquidating. Ray Kowalski has an intake form with Kyle's name, his ID, and the time of visit. I have a copy of that form. I picked up the watch. The only question I have is whether my mother gave Kyle the combination herself or whether Kyle found it written down somewhere in this house. Carol sat down at the kitchen table. The silence lasted long enough that I had my answer. Carol sat down. When words came, they came quietly. He needed seed money. Pewd Prop was going to be real this time. James Dennis's contact said he'd match whatever Kyle raised independently. We didn't think we were going to tell you. We were going to replace it with what? Dennis jumped in. Kyle's deal was going to generate. With what money, Dennis? Not a question. Kyle's last 3 ventures lost money. His YouTube channel has 40 subscribers. You are going to replace a $9.0 watch with money from a business that hasn't earned $1 yet. Dennis had the specific expression of a man whose argument has collapsed and who is rearranging its wreckage to look like a different argument. You've always resented Kyle. This isn't about the watch. I picked up the intake form from Kowalski Gold and Pawn, which I had folded in my back pocket, set it on the table between them. Kyle Pewd, your son, your address. I tapped the page. This is what the police report is going to say when I file it tomorrow morning." Carol's hand went to her mouth. "You wouldn't do that," Dennis said. "Dennis," I held his gaze. "You and my mother took the combination to my safe, which my mother obtained by being in my home, and gave it to your son, who used it to steal my dead father's only gift to me." "Yes, I would absolutely do that." I left the house without another word. Not dramatically. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out, got in my truck, and drove home. That evening, I called an attorney. Her name was Angela Marsh, a civil and criminal law attorney with an office in the South End neighborhood of Charlotte on Remount Road. A colleague had recommended her 2 years earlier, and I had saved her number in my phone under attorney, and hoped I would never need it. I needed her now. I met with Angela the following morning, Friday, April 19th, 2024, and laid out everything: the watch, the safe, the combination, Kyle's visit to Kowalski Gold and Pawn, the intake form, my mother's presence in my apartment in January, the connection between all of it. Angela listened without interrupting, which told me she was good. People who interrupt don't have the full picture yet. Angela waited until I was done, then asked 4 precise questions, then said, "The criminal exposure here is straightforward. Theft by taking under North Carolina General Statute 1472, the watch has a fair market value in excess of $10, which makes this a Class H felony. The use of your mother's access to obtain the safe combination to facilitate the theft potentially elevates it. I'd recommend filing the police report today before Kyle has time to talk to anyone." I filed the report that afternoon at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department District Office on Tivoli Road. The detective who took my statement, a man named Sergeant Paul Greer, was methodical and unremarkable in the way that good investigators often are. He took the intake form from Kowalski, my statement, and a copy of the original will document confirming the watch had been left to me. He told me Kyle Pute would be contacted within 48 hours. Then I told Angela about the safe deposit box. She was quiet for a moment when I finished describing the bonds and the ledger. "Then the bonds are yours outright. If they were issued in your name, they're not estate property and can't be contested. Redeem them through Treasury direct deposit to your own account." She paused. "The ledger is interesting. The statute of limitations on civil debt collection in North Carolina is 3 years from the date of default. Some of these entries are from 2014. Those may be past the window, but anything from 2019 is still collectible. And if contracts were signed, the documentation your father kept is exactly what an attorney would need to pursue recovery. Can you handle the collections?" "That's what I do on the civil side." "Yes. Start with the 2019 entries. Work forward." Angela looked at me with the focused attention of someone recalibrating their assessment of the person across the table. "You've thought about this." I had about an hour in a bank viewing room to think about it. She almost smiled. "Give me the ledger. I'll have a recovery analysis to you by Wednesday." Kyle Pute was interviewed by Sergeant Greer and Detective Lisa Farrow of the CMPD Property Crimes Unit on Monday, April 22, 2024, for days after I filed my report. I was not present for that interview, obviously, but I received a summary from Angela, who received it from the detective's update to me as the complaining witness. What Kyle told them was in order that he had borrowed the watch from me with permission, that he had planned to redeem it and return it before I noticed, and that this was all a family misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion. The intake form from Kowalski Gold and Pawn, which stated that Kyle had identified the watch as belonging to his family and said he was selling it, contradicted the borrowed with permission story in a way that Kyle apparently could not explain satisfactorily. He was charged on April 23, 2024 with theft by taking Class H felony under NCG's 1472 and released on a $5,000 secured bond which Dennis Pute posted. I want to stop and say something directly here because I know what some people are thinking. He's your family. Was it worth it over a watch? And I want to be clear about what this was and was not about. This was not about the watch. The watch was the symbol. The watch was the line. What this was actually about was 20 years of a certain kind of treatment of being the son who worked, who showed up, who paid his bills, and did his job and asked for nothing while the other kid coasted and failed and got bailed out over and over by money and loyalty that was supposed to be shared, but was allocated entirely in one direction. What this was about was my mother standing in my kitchen on a January afternoon and writing down a number that she would later pass to the person who stole the last thing my father ever gave me. Some things are not about money. Some things are about what people decide you're worth. My father decided I was worth a watch he wore for 23 years and a box of things he spent decades quietly building. That decision deserved a defense. I defended it. Angela's civil recovery analysis arrived the following Wednesday, April 24, 2024. As promised, of the 14 accounts in my father's ledger, 6 were past the 3-year statute of limitations under North Carolina civil law. 8 were still within the window. The 8 outstanding balances totaled $38,900. Of those 8, 3 had businesses still operating at the same addresses listed in the ledger contracts. 2 had verifiable home addresses through public records. 3 were harder to locate. Angela sent formal demand letters to the 5 she could confirm. By May 15, 2024, 3 weeks later, 2 had responded with payment offers. 1, a general contractor named Boyd Harmon, who had shorted my father $9,200 on a residential addition job in the Dworth neighborhood of Charlotte in 2019, tried to dispute the amount owed. Angela attached the original 14-page contract, the invoice, the payment history, and a notice of intent to file a lien on the completed property, which was still legally attachable because the statute of limitations on construction liens in North Carolina is 3 years from substantial completion, and the job had completed in late 2021. Boyd Harmon paid the full $9,200 within 5 business days of receiving that letter. By the end of June 2024, Angela had recovered $31,400 from 5 of the 8 accounts. The remaining 3 were still being pursued, 2 of which had verifiable assets that made collection realistic. I redeemed the savings bond through Treasury Direct in May 2024. Total redemption value $51,200 deposited directly to my personal checking account. The transaction took 11 business days from submission to deposit. I want to be precise about what I am not saying. I am not saying my father was a wealthy man. I am not saying he left me a fortune. I am saying that he had spent 21 years quietly building a safety net for his son out of bonds he bought during good years and ledger entries he maintained after every job that shorted him. And he had hidden all of it in a place that only his son could reach. In a watch that only his son would inherit through a note that only someone who loved the watch the way his son did would ever find. That is not a fortune. That is a father. The criminal case against Kyle Pute moved through the Mecklenburg County court system on the standard timeline for a Class H felony property crime. At the plea negotiation stage in August 2024, Kyle's attorney approached Angela, who was not the criminal attorney, but stayed in communication with Sergeant Greer on my behalf with a proposed plea to a misdemeanor larceny charge in exchange for full restitution and a suspended sentence. Angela relayed this to me and asked what I wanted to do. I thought about it for exactly 1 day. My answer was, I would not oppose the plea if restitution was set at the current fair market value of the watch, $8,750, based on a professional appraisal I had obtained in May, plus a civil judgment against Kyle for $2,000 in associated costs, and a written acknowledgment signed and notarized that Kyle Pute had taken the watch without my knowledge or consent. Kyle's attorney accepted. The plea was entered in Mecklenburg County District Court on September 3, 2024. Kyle Pute pleaded guilty to misdemeanor larceny. He received a 45-day suspended sentence, 12 months of supervised probation, and was ordered to pay $10,750 in restitution and costs. He has not paid $1 of it yet, but the judgment is on record. His credit knows about it, even if he's pretending it doesn't. Pute Prop, for what it's worth, never launched. The website came down in June 2024. Kyle's Instagram page, which had been posting startup journey content with rented equipment and borrowed office space, went private in July and stopped posting entirely by August. The last post, still visible to people who followed before it went private, was a photograph of a desk with a laptop and a coffee cup and the caption, "Building in silence, Big things coming. That was posted March 2024. Nothing came. My mother called me 3 times between April and September 2024. The first call, she wanted to explain. The second call, she wanted me to drop the charges. The third call, she told me that I had broken the family and that my father would be ashamed of how I had handled this. That third call is the one I want to address because it's the one that was designed to land hardest. She was wrong. And I say that not with anger. The anger had mostly metabolized by then into something quieter and more settled, but with the certainty that comes from having read my father's words in a bank viewing room on Park Road, and knowing exactly what he thought I was worth. I'm proud of you. Stop letting people talk you out of that. He wrote that in 2019, 2 years before he died. He wrote it knowing he might not get to say it in person. He wrote it for exactly this kind of moment, for the moment when someone who claimed to love me tried to use his name to make me feel small. My father was a man who planned ahead. He was also a man who knew his son, and he knew, I think, that the watch wasn't the important part. The important part was everything that came after finding it. The box, the bonds, the ledger, the letter. The important part was the lesson embedded in the whole construction of it. Look closer. Look further. Trust the work. Trust yourself. Don't let the noise win. I have not spoken to my mother since September 2024. I don't know whether that will change. I'm not sitting around waiting for it to. As of the time I'm writing this, February 2025. Here is where things stand. The watch is on my wrist. I wear it every day now. Not on weekends only, not in the safe. Every day I catch it on things sometimes, and I don't panic about it anymore. The scratch at 4:0 that my father put there in 2018 is exactly where it's always been. I've added one of my own, a thin mark on the bezel from catching it on a conduit bracket in November. My father would have appreciated that. He believed that marks on tools meant they were being used right. The bonds are redeemed and in my account. Angela has collected a total of $34,600 from the ledger accounts as of this month, with one case still pending. She sent me a final accounting in January, and noted that my father had kept better records than most attorneys she worked with. I told her that tract. Calpute has not paid the restitution. Angela has filed for wage garnishment through the court. It will eventually reach him whether he moves or not, because that is how judgments work in North Carolina. They follow you. I bought a house in the Steel Creek area of Southwest Charlotte in October 2024, 4 blocks from where my father's shop used to be. Single-story, solid bones, a detached garage that needed rewiring, which I did myself over a weekend. The previous owner told me the neighborhood was changing. I told him I was fine with that. I grew up not far from here. I know what these streets look like when they're taken care of. My father's rolling toolbox is in my garage. I brought it from storage the week I moved in. It sits against the east wall, under a fluorescent shop light that I installed myself. And every time I open the top drawer, I see his socket set laid out in order, every size in its place. The 916 deep is there. The tape marks on the underside still visible, where the key was stuck. I left the tape on. I always will. The note from the watch is in the same velvet pouch the watch arrived in at the attorney's office after my father's funeral. It's in my nightstand drawer. I don't read it often anymore. I don't need to. I've memorized it. But I like knowing it's there, knowing that he thought to put it there, that he planned it far ahead, that he trusted me to find it. You'll know what to do. He was right. I did. Some fathers leave money. Some fathers leave property. Mine left a watch with a note inside it, and a box, and a vault, and a ledger of every person who had ever shorted him. And the quiet, durable message underneath all of it. I built this for you. Now you build something too. I'm building. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.